Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Rachel Hawkins. Rachel is the New York Times bestselling author of The Wife Upstairs, Reckless Girls, The Villa, and The Heiress, as well as multiple books for young readers. Her work has been translated into over a dozen languages. She studied gender and sexuality in Victorian literature at Auburn University and currently lives in Alabama. The Storm is her latest book. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be on here and talk about some killer women.
Let's talk about some killer. It's so funny. I told Rachel before we started recording that I read the other book of Rachel's that I've read is Reckless Girls, which is set on a boat. And so I feel like, now Rachel is the water obsessed author that I get to talk to because I hear I'm landlocked in Montana. So before we dig into all the so many wonderful twists and fun stuff with old friendships and women and men and all these fun things, tell our listeners about The Storm.
So, The Storm takes place in the fictional town of St. Medard's Bay, Alabama, which is based partially on Gulf Shores or Orange Beach. A huge part of this book, by the way, was me like doing the propaganda to remind people that Alabama has beaches.
Right? Yeah.
People forget. People forget. We have really nice ones. But St. Medard's Bay is a small beach town in Alabama that is notorious for the hurricanes that tend to come through and decimate the town, save for this one hotel, the Rosalie Inn, that's still standing after 100 years. And The Storm follows the current owner of the Rosalie, Geneva Corliss, who is dealing with trying to run a hotel, a hurricane coming in. And just as she's got all that going on, who comes back into town but St. Medard Bay's most notorious young woman, or older now when she comes back, Lo Bailey, who in the 1980s was accused of killing her lover, who was also the governor of Alabama's son and a married man, during one of the notorious hurricanes that hit St. Medard's Bay. She's got a true crime writer with her who's going to write her story. And a lot of secrets come out in the course of all of that. And of course, you've got a hurricane bearing down on the town. So
I love
lots
it.
going on.
It's like my book Whiteout was like set in a blizzard. This feels like
Mm,
the this is like the whiteout version of, for Alabama, right?
exactly.
So I'm so curious. I mean, first of all, I love the dynamic. So there were these three women who were friends, as
Mhm.
kids or as young, I should say, as teenagers, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
I actually have the same exact setup in Pinky Sweater. I love the dynamic of like those young female friendships because also like they're sort of like become like family, right? You learn
Right.
so much about yourself from I think almost more from the friendships that you have as a young person than even from your family, right? And yet you're
Exactly.
also we're so young and so quick to be like, well, the man matters, so we'll throw each other under the bus in a heartbeat for the guy, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we're not smart enough yet to be like, huh, is that really what we want to be doing? So
Exactly.
tell me what about, yeah, how did this start? Who was the first character, and is there a moment when you're like, this is the story?
Yeah, this book has gone through like so many twists and turns, sort of more than a lot of my books. Actually, this is it's had a lot of versions of itself. So it kind of started probably, I think it was February of 2023, maybe even 2022. I was coming off like a really long book tour and like a really hard book that I'd written before. The Heiress had taken a lot out of me. And so I took myself off to like the beach of my childhood,
Yeah.
just for 3 days by myself because I was like, I don't know what the next book is, and let me see what occurs to me at the beach. And it was like February, like I said, so it was like off-season beach, which was always really fun.
Yeah.
And so I went down there and I had this idea of like, I've always wanted to do a thriller set during a hurricane because, as I sort of say in the books, hurricanes are like the one natural disaster that you've got a lot of advance warning
Yeah.
for. So one, you've got like that great ticking time bomb of like this thing is coming. But also I was like, well, if you wanted to, I don't know, get rid of someone and you knew this thing was coming, you could premeditate more than say like if there was an earthquake or a tornado or something like that. Um, and so I knew it, so I had that hurricane idea and I loved like the small beach town. There is a bar in Alabama that's actually on the Florida Alabama line called the Floribama. And I knew I've always wanted to write about that bar. So I had all of that in my head. And so the first kind of crack I took at the storm was very different, but like I can see the DNA of what it became.
Mm-hmm.
It was a family story again. It was sisters who had been separated for years. Something happened one summer, when they were teenagers that they don't talk about. And meanwhile, there had also been the disappearance of this young woman who was filming a movie down there and was staying at their family hotel. And so this was kind of where it started, and which is very different from
Yeah,
what the
so
story ended up
different. I mean,
being.
I could see that being a very
Yeah.
compelling story, but it's very different from where this one.
Yeah. And what ended up happening was I got about halfway through it and I emailed my editor and I'm like, this ain't it, basically, which is like a very scary thing to have to say. But I was like, this is not working. And the problem is not something that can be edited out. Like, sometimes like something's not working and your editor can look at it, and say
Yeah,
like, oh, well, it's a little obvious or whatever. I was like, no, I'm not having fun right now.
yeah.
And if I'm not having fun, the reader's not going to have fun. So she said, take a break from it. And I did. And I wasn't even sure that I was going to return to like the beach town or the storm or whatever. But I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then I read a true crime essay by Dominic Dunn, who I miss Dominic Dunn's writing so much. He was, really popular in like the 80s, especially. And he had this really cool article about a young woman named Vicki Morgan, who had been a political mistress also as a teenager. And while she was not accused of killing anyone, she herself was later murdered. And there was all this kind of stuff of like, was she just killed by her roommate because, they had both fallen on hard times and these things happen, or was it because she was keeping these like political secrets? But I was really fascinated by this girl who I was like, everyone was so mean to her because she was having an affair with like a big deal, the guy that owned Bloomingdale's. And but she was a teenager and he was
Right,
like in his 50s and a married
right,
man. Like, but
right,
she
right.
was so like, and again, I'm like, she was like 17 when she met him, you guys. And
We
I'm not
always throw
saying,
the women under the bus. We
yeah,
always throw the women. It's just
and
like, come on.
so exactly. And I'm like, I really want to write about a Scarlet woman, basically, and especially about someone who had this thing happen when they were very young, but everybody blames them for. And
Yeah,
so thinking about that idea of like, I want to write like, what is it like to have been under a microscope like that, or to sort of be notorious for, all the wrong reasons. And then I realized like, oh, wait a minute, like I can fit that into my storm idea again.
yeah.
And that's how we sort of came up with, but yeah, it was very long process. That's
I
why
was
there was a
thinking
year between
so
books. Yeah.
I'm guessing that means you're not like a outliner.
I am to a degree,
Okay.
but sometimes like so I basically my outlines are just I tell myself the book in a document,
Yeah.
and so because I always say usually it's easier to see like the problems, when you're just on like page 5
Yeah.
of an outline
Yeah.
than, when you're 200 pages into a manuscript. But the outline couldn't predict that like I was not going to enjoy it,
Yeah.
basically. And I joked that it was because so much of the flashback stuff in that original version was these sisters as teenagers, like 17 or so. And I used to write YA, and I'm like, I think I'm having like YA induced PTSD or something.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm writing a teen romance again, and I don't want to be doing that.
Right. Right.
So yeah, so but with this one, yeah, when I came back to it, I just like threw out the old outline and started a new one.
Yeah.
But this one, luckily, I had a good time writing.
Yes, I mean, I can feel that the energy is great.
Mm,
I mean, it is interesting. I want to talk about this. So these, the women like Lo, right?
mm,
She, of course, didn't have like the resources, right, to get herself out of this town, and so of course she, met this man who had, was wealthy and powerful, and I think this is what I mean. It runs so rampant in our society
mm.
for these men to sort of entice young women and younger, um,
Right.
with the idea of like, in what choice, like really what choice do they, I mean, you want to say, girl, stay away, but you can see
Yeah,
how it happens, right? The women have no, this is like going to be
exactly.
the way out.
And especially like in this book, with Landon, the governor's son that Lo gets involved with, it was really important that in the beginning, like he's handsome and he's charming and he's not 60 years old like Alfred
No,
Bloomingdale. That's Ricky
no,
Martin. He's like
right.
30. Um, and
But he
and
is
he's
married.
but he is married and
Hmm.
he's promising things like, and he's saying these things like, well, I'm just so happy with you. Like I feel so free here. And oh, if only I could, throw off the
Right,
shackles of my life of privilege.
right.
And when you're young, that idea of like, oh, I'm special then
Hmm.
really
I'm going to be the
hits.
savior, right? I'm going to save this wealthy man
Exactly.
from his boring life, right? Yeah.
Right, right. And they can't
So,
see the ways in which they're being used, or that, and again, that like these are not promises he has any intention of keeping because he can have his cake and eat it too.
right.
And of
Although,
course, that's what he's going to want to do.
I appreciated, sorry to interrupt you, that I appreciated also that Landon didn't feel like the cookie cutter, like there was, you could almost, I mean,
Mhm.
as the story proceeds, you learn there are probably things he really thought he wanted and could have. And he wasn't just like,
Yeah, he's not lying to her,
no, I don't think he
necessarily.
is
Yeah.
right. And
Mhm.
I think the nuance is really important because, and of course, it was in real life, we're like, no, that guy's bad. That woman is the
Right.
victim. And I
Yeah.
think just to a lot of extent, that's how these cases go. But there's also, you can imagine like a man, like his wife can't have children, right? So
Right.
he
Mhm.
imagines himself as a parent and, or as a father. And so
Mhm.
he has all these disappoint. His dad is expecting all these things from him. So you can
Right.
see, not that we feel a ton of sympathy for him,
No,
but
but yeah, it doesn't work if he's just so clearly like a villain,
right,
like we see the things that are wrong with, and I think like that's the thing I've tried to do. I joke that like the men in my thrillers are such trash, and that's why when I write romances, Aaron Sterling, like those men are such like cinnamon rolls and such good guys, so
yeah,
that there's balance. But at the same time, I'm always trying to make the point like they're still humans, and
oh,
so and a lot of like what Landon does is like I said, he isn't lying to her. He does want to be with her. But he's also just incredibly selfish
right,
and very used to getting his own way and can't necessarily, I think because his dad has all these expectations, he sees himself as a victim in so many ways and he
right.
can't
Oh,
see the way,
absolutely,
yeah,
right, right,
in
right,
which so to him he's like, how could I possibly have privilege or whatever. Look at what I'm having to deal with, which is
right,
ridiculous, but
right.
it's human, which is what I'm
Right.
always interested in.
No, I agree with you. And the other thing about it is that, this is a man who's in some ways like he's not very strong, right? He's not strong
Right.
enough to
Mhm.
walk away from, certainly not going to walk away from his father with the resources and all that and stand on
Right.
his own. So he's the victim, but he's also the victim of his own. So I
Absolutely.
totally appreciate that. And I appreciate those, sort of the friendship and the way that I mean, because these three girls, when they're, growing up, they each have sort of different struggles. They're all struggling, right?
Hmm.
And it's the two mainly, right? It's Lo and Lizzie. Am I gonna get that right?
Oh, Ellen, and
Oh,
well, it's
Ellen.
like yeah, Ellen. Yeah.
Ellen, sorry.
You're good.
Yeah, that they,
Hurricane Lizzie's in there, so that's yeah,
yeah,
Lizzie is in the
I was
group.
like,
So
so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
good. Yeah,
yeah,
I know. Sometimes yeah, so many
yeah.
names. I can't even keep my own names straight, so I'm
I
not
hear
gonna be able
you.
to keep all the
I
names
hear
of
you.
everyone else straight. But anyway, yes,
Mhm.
sorry, Ellen. And they,
Mhm.
they each had sort of different types of struggles, right? I mean, I think
Right.
and but of course, from each other's perspective, somebody else's situation always looks better, right?
Exactly.
I think is
Exactly.
another thing we do, and we do it, and we don't not unfortunately we don't stop doing it. They're still doing it.
Oh,
Um,
constantly. Yeah.
and I love that August is this like d sort of dashing true crime writer, and here's Geneva just trying to keep this place afloat after her sucky boyfriend left. I just love all that. It just all feels so like everybody's kind of had just all the shit happen to them in their life.
Right, right. Well, because like that's
Right.
another thing. Like you want people to like, if people are going to act in the ways that they're eventually going to act in my thrillers, you sort of have to put everybody in like a fairly desperate circumstance. Because again, I want everyone to, even if you're like, oh, I wouldn't do that myself, or oh, I don't like what this person did. I want them to still kind of feel that like, but I get it. I get
Yeah.
why you might make these choices.
Right. And it felt like not a lot of, I mean, and Ellen's mother has got dementia, so she's
Hmm.
supporting her and yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of choices for her, other
No, yeah,
than to do what she's doing
yeah,
and put herself really like she's gonna end up in a dangerous spot, which because of the storm and staying and being like, oh no,
Right, right.
Rosalie has to survive. So it's so fun. So once you have an, what does it look like for you? Like, once you have your sort of outline, which is sort of how the story, I imagine is sort of, and this might happen and this and that, but it's not so specific. Um,
Mhm.
so do you find yourself just, do you have a routine for how you sit down? Do you leave yourself hanging? I always find these things that like there's tricks for people and how they keep their stories moving. I always am curious to hear about. And we have a lot of
Yeah.
aspiring authors who listen, so I think we all
Right,
can those
yeah.
stories.
Yeah, this book, like I said, this book was just weird in so many different ways, and it's was the writing process was incredibly weird. Because
Talk
it was
about
a
that
hard
though. Tell
one.
me,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's so I am like I don't have like a particularly set writing routine. That doesn't necessarily work for me. But I've got friends that are very much like I do my however many words a day,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I tend to be very feast or famine. So I like to like go all in on a draft so that I am writing these huge chunks every day. Or I'm not writing at all. Basically, and I'm trying to get a little more balanced on that, but I don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah, whatever
Um,
works, works. That's the
yeah,
problem
it's
with
kind
this
of
business too. Yeah.
I used to like really beat myself up about that. Like, why can't you just, if you would just be more consistent, you wouldn't like write 8,000 words today and like hurt your wrists or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just, this is how it works. But for this book, um, like I said, because it was so tough, I was sort of sending it like in chunks to my editor, which I never ever do. Or like I would like have like certain scenes written and then like outlines for the next, like here's what happens here. And it just sort of grew like that.
Yeah.
I also wrote a lot of this book, and I'm someone who loves sleep. Like I will not do without sleep usually, but this book, like I really liked writing it like in the middle of the night for some reason. So that
I
was the
love the way
strangest
you talk
thing.
about it. It makes it almost sound like a pregnancy. You're like, I
Yeah.
had things in the middle of the night, and then I really struggled with it's. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's really what it felt like, honestly. Because yeah, I've always liked to write in the house when like other people are in the house, but they're sleeping. So I used to
yeah,
get up very early and write, and I always enjoyed that. But no, I was like staying up to like 3 in the morning to work on this, which is crazy, and I never want to have to do that again.
crazy.
And but this book had been so complicated for me that I was just kind of like, okay, I don't like this. I don't like staying up at night to work on it, but if that is when it's clicking, that's we're just gonna follow where the book leads. I will say, like the thriller I'm working on now has been much more my normal kind of speed, and it has not required this.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
so.
good at
Do you
least.
feel like the hard part came from the fact that you had invested so much time in a job that didn't work? Is that, and then that sort of
Yeah,
carried over, and you were like, oh shit, now I feel behind, and also,
yeah, exactly. I really do think. I think that I had kind of, and again, I was given the choice of like, do you just want to like trash this and start over and do something new and maybe come back to this later? And at the time, I was like, when I was in the middle of drafting this, I was like, oh God, I should have taken her up on that. Why did I do this? But now I'm so glad that I
yeah,
came back to it because I was like, I'm so proud of the book and I'm so happy with how it turned
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just think that because its birth process had been tough, as it were, that's going to be a good metaphor for this whole
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. You can have it. It's yours, Rachel. You take it.
Thank you. It just meant that like I said, I had to, it was just going to be harder.
Yeah.
And accepting that and instead of like fighting against it, or I think like, this I guess was, I don't know, like my 19th book or something like that. I and every book is its own beast. And it's like, like you don't write the same book twice. The process can really be different depending on what's going on in your life, what's going on in your brain. Um, for me, quite frankly, too, I had like just hit like perimenopause, which is a
Yeah.
really
Super
weird
fun, right?
in your
Yeah.
brain.
Been
And
there.
yeah, it's a good time. And also I have ADD. And I actually later read that like when those two things combine, like people have thought they've had like early onset dementia. And it's like, no, your brain chemistry is just bananas. So it took a while for that to kind of regulate as well. And so I think that was part of why it was tough. I said later to my editor that it's a really tortured metaphor, or simile, but I was like, I felt like I had been like knitting a blanket with like broken arms, and it was kind of blanket shaped. And like my arms were healing, and so the blanket was getting better, but there was still all this messed up blanket that had to be kind
Yeah.
of fixed and brought back into. And that was sort of what the process had felt like. But yeah, but at the same time, like I will, now that it's over, I can really look back on those like late nights, just me in my living room with my cats, and it's 2 in the morning, and like I was at the Rosalie,
Yeah.
or and like that's really special to me now when I think back on, and I think it's in the book weirdly. So much of the book happens at night, it seems like.
Yeah.
And
No, that's true too. Yeah.
yeah. And so I think I just needed like that kind of immersion, and I needed that like almost personal ticking time bomb for myself of like, bitch, don't you want to go to bed?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
go,
I mean, yeah.
go.
I mean, right. Ellen wanted, I
Right.
mean, yeah, she wanted
Yeah.
to go to bed. Geneva wanted to go to bed, right? It's like,
Yes,
but there's,
exactly.
yeah, there's no choice because there's somebody left their bikes down the beach and you got to go get them.
You
So
got to
that
go
kind of
get them.
stuff, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
how do you feel like because I think it takes a lot to sort of trust the process. I think one of the hardest things about
Mhm.
being an author, as you said, is, and I'm about the same place you are in terms of number of
Mhm.
books, and every book is different, but like, how do you trust the process? Because then you have that experience where you get to 200 pages and you're like, this doesn't work. And then you got to
Mhm.
start the next one and trust the process again. Like, what's the
Right.
trick to that? That's so
I mean,
hard.
it's so hard. Yeah, as you know, it's really hard. I one thing I do, I've got like my books in the living room all kind of lined up, just like one of each. And I always look at that and I'm like, you did all of that. And
Yeah.
every time you did one of those, you felt like this.
Yeah.
But there it is. Because like, I don't know about you, but like when I was first starting writing, like before I ever like got published, but when I was trying to be a writer,
Yeah.
finishing things was the hardest thing,
Yeah.
like because you'd get like 100 pages in and be like, well, now I'm bored and I've got
Yeah.
this other idea, maybe this is the one. And you sort of have to realize that like, no, about 100 pages in you're going to be like, is there something else I could be doing with my
Right.
more time?
Right. Yeah, it was
um,
really fun there for a beat. Now I'm not, it's not as much fun.
yeah, yeah, and then it picks up and you start having fun again.
Yes.
But yeah, I do definitely think like I remind myself that like you can do this, you have done this, and yeah, you've just got to trust it. But yeah, it's not always easy, and that's I always really want to tell aspiring writers that like yeah, we struggle with this too. Sitting down and opening the document is usually the hardest part of my writing day.
Yeah.
Because there's so many more like writing's hard, and every day you're bumping up against your own what feels like your own limitations,
Yep.
and you've got to tell yourself like it takes like a healthy amount of ego to write a book because you're like, I've got a story that I think people should read.
Right. Exactly.
Takes the like humility to sort of be like, is this story working, and oh, did I mess it up, and do I need to, so yeah, it's just, again, it's such a leap of faith with every book
Yeah.
that like, you feel like, okay, well, let's hope we get to the end of this one.
I mean, and we're not alone because actually Sandra Brown was on the show and she was saying, she was talking, I mean, she has like 113 New York Times
Oh my
best,
God, yeah.
right? And she was
Yeah.
like saying the same thing. She's like, I look at my bookshelf and I think, oh, it's it. You did it this many
Mhm.
times, but you're never doing it again. And then you were like, and then
Yeah.
she's like, nope, you can do this
Mhm.
again, And I'm just
Mhm.
like, wow, I guess that's a bummer.
That's yeah.
That
It
never
never
goes
goes.
away. We're gonna deal with that forever.
Sandra
Yeah.
Brown, come on. Oh
I
man.
know.
No.
Give me a break. So when you're in the process of, working and rewriting, and so when you got to this sort of, I'm so curious about this abandoned book because I think I have unfortunately not abandoned it at 200 pages. I have written all the way to the end to have to abandon
Mhm.
it, and I
Yeah.
kind of, and I remember being like thinking in the middle, like, this doesn't feel quite right, but I know that if it get to the end, then there'll be something that you can do
Mhm.
with it, and then getting to the end and being like, no, there's really nothing to do with this. So,
Yeah, there's no fixing this. Yeah.
there's no fixing it. So I guess I'm curious about like, what were was it about like, okay, you got to the blank page and you're like, I just don't know where we're going. It was,
It
what
was
happened?
it was the weirdest thing because like I knew where I was going, but it was like absolutely pulling teeth to
Yeah.
just like write like a sentence on it. And that was the strangest feeling because I've always had the like, oh, I don't want to get started or whatever, I want to go do something else. But almost always like when I get into it,
Yeah, you
the
love it.
flow starts happening and I'm having a great time. And this just wasn't like that. It was like I was never 'cause, like to me, my favorite part of writing, the most magical part of it is that when you really feel like you have just locked in, like you are in a flow state, and it's like it's almost like unspooling in front of your eyes like a movie or something, and it's just you're in it. And I've never had a book where that wasn't the case. Like now I've had some books where it was more like that than
Yes,
you know.
right.
Um,
But you've never
the
not hit that
but
spot.
I've never not hit that spot. And with that original draft, there was one part where I hit that spot, and luckily a part that I was able to save for the
Oh,
storm.
yeah.
It's the first sort of hurricane that we see from the past,
Mm,
with the young woman with an older husband who's really awful to her, and they're
right.
staying.
I love that. Yeah.
That
She
scene,
climbs the tree.
yeah, she climbs the tree, exactly. And that scene I wrote, and at the time, the hurricane, like sort of vignettes that were going to be in the book, weren't necessarily related to the main plot, which, like, in retrospect, is incredibly stupid. Like, here, just read this random,
Yeah, it
here, do you
makes
want,
so much sense
right?
now in the
It
story.
makes so much more sense now. But yeah, originally that character who goes up the tree, like in the book now, she's Lo's mom,
Yeah.
but in the original, she was just like some lady. And but that was the only one. That was the only thing I ever drew, and that's why when I was like seeing what I could salvage, I was like, okay, well
This
this
one, yeah.
this can,
You're
and
like
I'll figure
these
out.
5,000 words, way to go. These
Yeah,
gets
these are good. Everything else, not
Oh,
so
that's
much.
so painful. I have a question. Like, there's so many wonderful twists, which we will not talk about. You have to read the book.
Yes, yes.
But I am curious to know, like, do you feel like you know those going in, or do you discover them?
Usually I know most of them because I
Okay.
do try to I always say like thriller readers are the smartest readers
They
out there.
are.
They're
Damn, they're
so,
so
so
smart.
smart.
So true.
And the thing is, and they read a lot, they're really
Yeah.
prolific readers. So
Yeah.
I was like, you're not going to be able to surprise all of them all of the time.
Right.
Um, so my thing has always been, I just hope at least if I can't surprise, let me satisfy.
Yeah.
Like it's fine if you saw it coming, but you're like, yeah, good. Okay, I see what you did
Yeah.
there. And I was
Yeah.
following those breadcrumbs. Love that. So I always say that when I'm plotting one of the thrillers that I want the reader to feel one step ahead of the characters. Like they have a little more information than the characters do, but I'm trying to stay one step ahead of the reader.
Yeah.
And so that does require outlining. Um, but I also leave myself open to like when organic twists can come up.
Yeah.
In this one, there were a couple. There were, I knew like the big ones. I knew
Mhm.
what had happened when and all that. But there was like I didn't realize that this one character I was writing was going to end up having like a certain connection to things. I was like, oh, that's who you are. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Um, so
I
things
think
like
I know
that.
who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
And
very,
those
yeah, I
things,
agree.
yeah. And those things came up organically as I was
Yeah.
going. But yeah, so for the most part I try to know, but like yeah, I always kind of leave room for surprise. And you just never know. You mentioned Reckless Girls. That was a book that I wrote the ending of like 5 different times. And I'm like, every version of it, I was like, it's not quite right. It's not quite right. But this was what I had in the outline that it would end like this.
Yeah.
But by the time I got there, it just didn't feel right. Until it finally, I was like, well, I'm going to write this ending, which is not what I thought I'd be writing
Right.
at all. And I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, there it is. That's
But I
that's how
love
it's
that. You have to be able to pivot, right? Like if you're like, this doesn't,
right.
I mean, because even if it looks good on an outline, it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Yeah. No,
Right,
that's
because the
amazing.
vibe of the book changes. Like,
Yeah.
you never quite know. Like I said, you know the story you're telling from the
Yeah.
outline, but you don't know, again, how once all these characters on the page together, what it'll start feeling like.
Yeah, and the characters run it a little bit of the show themselves. So all of a
Yeah,
sudden, if you're really being true to the characters, they can shake stuff up, and you're like, oh, dang, that's not where I had thought we were going, but that here we are.
exactly, exactly. And I always say that. I'm so glad to hear you say that because, like, like people will say, like, oh, the characters tell me what to do, and it's like that sounds like precious and like, and I'm like, but no, it's exactly that. It's if
Yeah,
you're writing and you're being specific and you have written this person, if you
yeah,
try to make them do something that's out of the character you created, it
right.
feels jarring as a
It
writer.
does. It
Like
totally is
I
uncomfortable, and you're like,
have
that's
not
not right.
written them as this, and that was where I ended up with Reckless Girls, where I was like, this is not the woman that she is to like run
Yeah,
off with this guy or whatever it was I had her doing.
yeah.
Uh, I was like, no, she's this actually.
Yeah. No, and I actually think that's the magic. It's the magic is when you're like, and it is, I mean, I know it sounds hokey to be like, oh, the character's telling me what to do, but there is a bit of that. Like if
Yeah,
I'm,
there is.
and I actually think like that's the thing, that's my favorite part is when all of a sudden
Oh,
you're like, who's even in charge here? Like,
Yeah,
and it's like, I'm
exactly,
not sure it's
exactly.
me, but it's so magical. Well, I had so much fun reading it. And I really loved Reckless Girls too, which I think I had gotten um yeah, somewhere else. I can't remember where I ended up with that, but I read that this year too. So I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
Rachel's going to be on the show. So it was fun
Yay,
that I had
perfect.
read two of them in such close
And my
succession.
two beach ones, yes.
And I the two beach ones. I know now I got it. Is there another Rachel that doesn't is not on the beach?
No, yeah, there's one in the mountains and there's one in Italy.
Oh wow. Okay. Well,
And the one I'm working on right now is in the jungle. So,
oh, I
which
love
is
that.
kind of beachy, I guess.
Well, they're wonderful, Rachel. It was so fun. I love the storm. And everyone, we will be giving away a copy of the storm, either over at the Facebook group, Danielle's Killer Women, or at Killer Women Podcast on Instagram. Rachel, tell our listeners how to follow you, where you are on the World
Yes.
Wide Web.
So I am on Instagram as at Lady Hawkins. I am also technically on Twitter/X, but I do not spend much time over there these days.
Yeah.
But I should have, I'm thinking of, I've got a website, rachelhawkinsbooks.com. But I'm thinking of like finding some new spaces to hang out in the new year. So I will keep people updated.
I love that. Okay, well, we'll check. We'll follow you at Lady Hawkins on Instagram and take it from there.
Yes.
But Rachel, it was so fun to talk today about the storm. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a good conversation. I had a great time.
So fun. Everyone, this was Rachel Hawkins on Killer Women, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.